Hello, everybody. My name is Marcos Molitzis. I am here with Carrie Alavelt. Welcome to this week's edition of Daily Kos The Brief, our weekly show about politics. Carrie, it feels like a Monday because we just had the holiday weekend, and so I'm a little bit discombobulated, but I think I'm gonna be okay. And today, though, I'm excited, right? Because all over the weekend, like Carrie and I have been like sending each other messages because Republicans are finally going at each other, right? Trump finally, there's some line that was crossed over the last week or so, and he's being attacked by Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida. He's being attacked by Mitch McConnell, by the CEO of Gab, which is one of the sort of these right-wing social media sites. Trump's been booed twice over the last couple of months. He's been booed twice. So things are finally fracturing, and it looks like Donald Trump's hold on the party is sort of splintering. And so you have this dynamic that's playing out on an election year. Like, we thought maybe it could hold. It doesn't look like it's holding. And this obviously has ramifications for 2022. We have the midterm elections coming up. This week's guest is actually going to be a great one to talk about this. It's Joe Trippi. He was Howard Dean's campaign manager back during that groundbreaking presidential campaign back in 2003, 2004. He also was the top chief strategist for Doug Jones in Alabama when he won that shocker upset special election victory. So he's somebody who knows what's going on outside of the typical liberal sort of bastions, right? The Bay Area and LA and New York and Chicago.
The serial pontificators like you and me. I mean,
Yeah, we're in our little bubbles. He's had to actually deal with people out in places like Alabama. So it's interesting because the historical storyline is that the president's party, in his first midterm election, after first being elected, loses seats. And historically, the average has been about 30 to 35 seats that the party in the White House loses in, unfortunately, it's just his first term. And so historically, you look at that, you look at Joe Biden's approval ratings, which are high 30s, low 40s, and not looking so particularly hot right now. You think, okay, yeah, this is going to play out like a typical historical year. It's going to be a rough year for the Democrats. But we've been talking about factors that may actually play against that. Just because it's always happened in the past doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to happen again. And Joe Trippi has a great podcast, That Trippi Show. You can catch it in all the places you listen to your podcasts. A couple of weeks ago, no, it was this last episode where he was talking about reasons that Democrats have for being optimistic. So he's not being doom and gloom. And a lot of the stuff he talks about is stuff that, Carrie, you and I have talked about before. So it's not, if you listen to this podcast, it's not particularly groundbreaking information, but it's nice confirmation bias, isn't it, Carrie?
Right. And we were like, hey, he's saying a lot of things that we've said. Let's have him on.
Yes.
Random sample of one. We both love what he said. Here he is.
So, yeah, it could be a little bit confirmation bias, but he's not wrong, and we're not wrong. And we're not saying that, yeah, for sure, we're going to win 2022's elections this November. Things are tough. Historically, they're tough, but they're not hopeless. And I think that's the message that is critical. We shouldn't be surrendering because history says in 2002 midterm election, George Bush's first midterm election, he actually gained seats in the House and Senate. 9/11 shook up that historical precedent. And now we have our version of 9/11. It's killed a lot more people, has had a much deeper impact in our party, in our country, in the world, and that is COVID, the pandemic. You have a historically strong man, a historically typical strong man running the Republican Party. Usually when you lose an election, you kind of get like shooed aside. Like, okay, you're a loser. You lost us. And Donald Trump, by all measures, was a huge loser, right? He won. Yes, he won his first year, lost a popular vote, but he won because of our stupid, broken democracy. But he also cost Democrats, he cost Republicans over a dozen governorships, lost control of the House, lost control of the Senate in Georgia by losing 2 races in Georgia in a special election. So if you sort of look at the
And
broad,
he was integral to those losses too. He was like, he truly helped with those losses.
right.
Anyway, just, it's not just like incidental that it happened while he was, still president. I mean, he really helped.
So if
Thank
you're
you.
being objective and thinking like, okay, let's see what this guy's record was with the party, and it's like, oh yeah, he cost us everything, you would kind of push him aside. But for whatever reason, the Republican Party decided to continue their allegiance to Trump, and that makes 2022. And I'm sure Joe Trippi is going to have a similar argument to this. We'll have him on in a little bit. That it's no longer just a referendum on Joe Biden. Because if it was just a referendum on Joe Biden, I'd be really worried about November. But now Trump is sort of bigfooting his way in, and it's going to become 2020 Redux, the sequel, but in the midterm election. And that creates enough uncertainty that I think gives us an opening for optimism. So, Carrie, you just wrote a piece of Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump starting to go at each other. They're not using each other's names. They're still being a little coy about it, right? But we know what they're doing, right? What do you think is driving that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, so first of all, I just want just a programming note for people. There's construction going on outside my apartment. So if I'm muting here and there, you hear a little jackhammer in the background, that's just a little mood music for us here, hammering away at the politics. But anyway, I'll try to keep it to a minimum. So yeah, I mean, we do have what I think is going to come to fisticuffs very soon between Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump kind of, he's been booed twice for talking about vaccines and encouraging people to get the vaccine at, last year at a rally in Alabama, and this year and last year again, just in December when he was on the Bill O'Reilly show. He talked about getting his booster, and he got booed both times. And, I think it's a little bit of a hit for him to see that that people aren't lockstep. I mean, his base at this point has firmly planted their flag in the anti-vax, corner of you're either with us or you're against us. And it's clear that Donald Trump's latest message trying to talk about, I'm boosted, I'm vaxxed, but, of course it's your decision. That's not good enough. That's not good enough for his base. And he got hit twice on that. And then he watched Ron DeSantis sort of, tiptoe around the question when he was asked recently, last week, he was asked about if he had been boosted, and Ron DeSantis is just like, oh, I got the normal shot or whatever, and then sort of like moved on from the discussion without getting nailed down on whether or not he was actually boosted. And he pivoted to some sort of anti-vaccine, anti-mitigation effort message, So, Donald Trump took a shot at him and said, hey, he went on One America News and said, well, I watch some of these politicians, not answer this stuff straight out. And I just think they're gutless. And he didn't say DeSantis's name, but it was a clear shot at DeSantis. And I'm sure he expected, or I think he expected, for DeSantis to stand down. And instead, DeSantis was asked on a subsequent podcast if there was any bad blood between him and Trump, and what was going on with that. And DeSantis said, "Oh no," he played that down. But then, like in one of the next several questions, DeSantis managed to say, "Oh yeah, one of my biggest political regrets as governor was not coming out firmer against national lockdowns. Early in the pandemic, which he didn't cite Trump for, but it was clearly under Trump's White House that the national lockdowns happened, right?" And DeSantis kind of said, oh, Dr. Fauci was giving, the top public health advisor at the time to Trump was giving bad advice to the White House and whatever. But, it was a shot back. It was kind of like, oh, if you think me not saying that I've gotten a booster is gutless, let me tell you what's really gutless: shutting down the entire nation in terms of, in the face of a pandemic. So we're getting that. And then of course, Trump just manages to do stuff. And his latest paranoid delusion was that the whole interview with DeSantis was a setup by Josh Holmes, who is the podcaster, and a former McConnell aide. And so it was a setup by Mitch McConnell to like get DeSantis to go after Trump and whatever. I mean, it is just, but the point is, right? And I think that just not to carry this on too long, but I do think this is important. You shared with me recently this message from the CEO of Gab.com, where he was saying, and I don't know where this
and Gab is a right-wing clone of Twitter.
Right. It's a right-wing social media platform that Trump's media platform, if it ever launches, will compete directly with for users, right? And they seem to have made the calculation that Trump isn't going to go with their platform. He's also not going to go with other right-wing platforms. He's decided to do his own. And so they're going to try to claw away his people so that they don't leave once his platform launches. And that the CEO said, and I don't even know the CEO's name, but in that message said, hey, we're going to stick with this being a freedom of speech platform. You can say whatever you want. We're not pro-vaccines. We're, anti-vaccine, and Trump can be pro-vaccine if he wants. I mean, I'm kind of like, this is not exactly what he said, but I'm paraphrasing a little bit here. It was basically saying Trump's not your guy anymore, but we're here for you. It was fascinating that this right-wing division. So, here you have this DeSantis and Trump going at each other. I think you have Trump really on shaky ground with his base on where he is, what he's trying to do with his, his part in the vaccine rollout, et cetera. And then you have Mitch McConnell, who really, his entire firepower comes down to, and has always come down to, his donor base and how much money and resources he can put towards people. But he has no value whatsoever and no sway whatsoever with the GOP base. He's at like 23% right now in civics in terms of the GOP base approvals of him. 23%. I mean, that is like unbelievable.
It offends me that they don't appreciate his evil genius.
Well, I'm sure he is offended by that, but he's never tried to woo them. He's never tried. And just for comparison's sakes, Trump right now, which is a little low actually, is at 85% with that base, right? So McConnell has no sway there, and his sway of fundraising has been diminished by the grassroots army that has, of small dollar donors who have gone for Trump, right? So Senate Republicans are eyeing their best chance in a while of potentially taking back the Senate, this year in a environment that should favor them. And they've got a real problem. Trump is picking their candidates. I'm sure Joe Trippi is going to get into this. But,
let's save that for Joe. Actually, he's here, so let's just bring him in.
Let's bring him in.
All right. So our guest today is Joe Trippi. You may remember him from Howard Dean's campaign. Also, more recently, he led Doug Jones to that upset victory in Alabama in that special election, gave us a bonus Senate seat, critically important. For 2 years, it's Alabama though. Yeah. And now Joe has a great podcast. I incredibly urge you all to check it out wherever you get your podcasts. It's called That Trippi Show. And it's Joe basically sharing his decades of incredible political experience and analyzing current events through that lens. It's actually really, really insightful. And that's why we actually have him on, because he had a great show this last week talking about Democrats' chances in 2022. So first of all, Joe, thank you so much for coming back on the show. Really appreciate it.
Hey, Marcos and Carrie, it's great to be with you guys. Thanks for having me.
So Joe, I'm just actually, Carrie, do you want to pick up the thread you were doing, or do we just want to talk broadly about why Joe thinks Democrats might outperform history?
I think talk broadly. Let's let him lay out, because I've listened to both his podcasts where he did that and the follow-up podcast, and I thought it was great. So let's just let him go for it with his reasons that are sort of against conventional wisdom that Democrats have a decent shot this year.
Yeah, well, listen, I think it's pretty clear to me that when you look at redistricting, for example, we started the year, and I was one of them. I looked at it and said, and watched what a lot of the folks who actually, look at that data and look at how the districts are going to come out and look at the census data. And everybody thought that the Republicans were going to have just in redrawing the line, start out 10 seats up from where they're at now. Forget about the election. That's just going to be 10 safe Republican seats added. That didn't happen. Democrats are doing much better in redistricting than people thought. It now actually looks like there'll be 4 districts, additional districts that Biden won in 2020.
And that's before New York and before the Ohio Supreme Court just said that Ohio has to redraw their insane gerrymander. So it might even be better than that.
Yeah, exactly, Marcos. That's what I'm saying. So the one thing, it's not going to be Republicans up, and it could be not even a wash, but Democrats up 4-6 seats, and when it all, or even maybe a couple seats even more than that. So that's a big sea change difference in what we're looking at. The second thing is, look, midterms are turnout elections. Fewer people come out, and in 2020, millions more voted for Democrats. And so we know the names of those people. We know who those people are. So grassroots effort to actually get them out, I think, it also, there's more of us to get out. So that's another thing that I think is going to matter.
And that's a more than 7 million differential there, more than 7 million voter differential. So
absolutely. But even in districts where we did turn out fewer Democrats than Republicans, I think, again, we know who they are, and I think we're going to be better organized to get our folks out. And I think, which gets to the third reason. The third thing is, look, they're nominating lunatics. You look at Herschel Walker in Georgia. Warnock, I think, has a much better chance than he would have had Trump not put his finger on the scale there, or his thumb on the scale, whatever the hand thing. But anyway, he did it. And I think that you're seeing this all over the place in different races around the country, where I think, are going to have a similar problem they had in 2010 when the Tea Party had control and nominated a bunch of crazy Tea Partiers who lost Senate seat after Senate seat. They should have had taken the majority, but instead they nominated the witch in Delaware.
The Senate. Yeah, in the House they won.
Yeah. But I'm saying, I think this is happening writ large, though. Yeah. Not just in the Senate this time, but in House seats around the country. They are the Trumpier. They're all fighting to become the Trump wannabe and moving farther and farther to the extreme. So they're going to have a bunch of lunatic candidates out there saying incredibly crazy things that are going to reflect on the rest of the party. Remember, they had to run away from things that that their Tea Party candidates were saying. I think that same thing's going to happen. And also within that same third thing are the inter-party fighting that's going on that you just talked about. Where the Trump candidate or the candidates fighting it out, there's going to be a McConnell candidate in some of these races, and the same thing in the House. I mean, some sort of a candidate that is not acceptable to the Trumpies, and they're going to fight it out in primaries. They're going to have people staying up. My candidate didn't win. I don't want a Trumpy, or my candidate didn't win. I can't believe somebody a rhino is the nominee. So you're going to have these rhino.
That's Republican name and name only. It's sort of a derogatory term for somebody who isn't as. I don't even think Trump is Trump enough anymore. I think Trump, having gotten a jab, is now a rhino to some of these people.
That's my point. So there's going to be I think they're going to have primaries in which swaths of their party are not enthused and upset. And I think, look, we're talking about the margins here. We're talking 3 or 4 points in some of these districts. And so I think, so that's the 3. Number 4, you look around, and even where we're having fights in the Democratic primaries, the candidate the caliber of the candidates that are running is just so amazing. I think even in Pennsylvania, Connor Lamb and Fetterman. I mean, in the race that's going on there, I think any one of them would be a strong, credible candidate against Dr. Oz, for example. And I take this. I'm talking about Senate races as we're talking through this because I think most people know some of these names, but it's happening at the House level too. So I think,
and Joe, just quickly, they're not ideological primaries either, right? I mean, there's nothing. Okay, somebody may say Connor Lamb's a blue dog, but the primary is not playing out as a battle between the wings of the party in the way that we're seeing on the right. It's personalities.
Exactly.
Multiple people want the same job, and they're going to fight over it. And it's not cataclysmic like one wing versus the other.
And I think part of that also is because there's a unifying factor in the party right now to come together behind the nominee in Pennsylvania or wherever in that district and rally in unified support, which is going to be the opposite of what happens with the Republican Party, I think.
I just imagine that there's going to be blood in the streets during those those very high-pitched primaries on the GOP side. I mean, it is, because it's the base is running the show in so many cases, and the base and everybody's just trying to say what they think the bigger part of the base wants to hear. And it's just going to be, I think it's going to be, take no prisoners disaster for the Republicans.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that leads to, look, there are factors that are not predictable. Things change during this year. They're going to. I think that the majority of things that are likely to happen are going to end up being as COVID dissipates, as people sort of understand what's really happening with the economy in terms of pay and other things that are going on. And I think inflation, I do believe inflation is transitory. We'll see. I could be wrong about that, but I just think that there are a number of things that this is sort of like the bottom of Biden's approval rating. I think that it's up from here, and any improvement is going to help. So but I think overall, the other thing I think is you start to get a sense that a true pro-democracy coalition from the ground up is starting to come together out there. I mean, that people are starting to understand this is an authoritarian party versus democracy, and that's reaching, I think, independents, former Republicans, some moderates within the Republican Party, and Democrats. I think that coalition is going to grow. I think it's going to start, even if we that's how we may have to overcome what they're doing with voting rights and voter suppression. It's all of us. And I think in that sense, what I want to help build is the kind of movement that we had, Marcos, that you were so important in building when we started to get the internet going, but to use those tools to pull that coalition together, regardless of ideology, regardless of party. This isn't Republicans versus Democrat. It's not right versus left. This is pro-democracy Americans coming together, using the technology that we have out there to bring people together, to give them the tools they need to make a difference, to get the vote out. And again, we know who our people are. And I really do think that you're going to see that pro-democracy, the energy behind that, rise and grow every day from now till November 2022. And I really believe that Democrats will hold the House, gain some seats in the Senate, and because of how important what's really on the ballot, it's democracy is on the ballot in November 2022. And I think people are starting to get that.
Let me just ask a quick follow-up to that, because you've made a career out of seeing things that other people haven't seen. What are you seeing in terms of the pro-democracy coalition that you're talking about? That I feel like a lot of voters really aren't aware yet of the, of the how dangerous the Republican Party is. The fact that they're trying to bury January 6th and won't talk about it. The fact that they, won't say anything negative about Trump, that they're still kowtowing to him and whatever. Maybe you're seeing it. Are you seeing it on a grassroots level? Are you seeing it on an organizer level? Or where are you seeing this energy starting to come from?
I think you're starting to. I think, first of all, January 6th, more and more facts are coming out every day and are going to continue to come. That's one of the other factors that no one's calculating. You look at where approval ratings are today and where the vote is today. And you still have a lot of, as you said, Carrie, you're right. A lot of Americans don't really understand the danger and the threat. I think that danger and threat's becoming more clear every day as more facts come out, and that's only going to increase. And I think go higher and higher up to folks that and facts and emails, taped conversations, whatever. But that stuff is going to come out, and that's going to. I think every day more Americans are awakening to the threat. I agree with you that. Well, first of all, a lot of this is normalcy bias. We all want. Joe Biden's been elected president. Okay, sigh of relief. We can go back to normal. And it's just. And by the way, I think there's a bunch of people in the Democratic Party in Washington, D.C. who still want to believe that you can reach across party lines and find some votes. I think every day, when we have the vote on voting rights and everything else, it's going to become clearer and clearer that that's just not the case, and what the threat really is. And so, yeah, I think that's part of the first thing of building the pro-democracy coalition is for each of us to, again, this goes back to Dean days, but find one more friend, one more coworker, one more neighbor to explain what the threat is and get them to join the pro-democracy coalition that we're all building out there. And you don't have to. I joined the Lincoln Project because I thought it was real important to demonstrate that like me and Stuart Stevens, we fought each other to the death in Senate races and governor's races. I hated. They were just ugly, negative, knockout, drag out races. I won one time. One time I particularly remember winning a Senate seat where he was on the other side, and I said to myself, "Please God, don't let me ever have to get in another fight with this guy." Because he's so tenacious and just bare knuckle fighter. Why would I join with him now? Well, I'll tell you right now, because that's not what any of this is about. It's not about past, history with any of us. It's about all of us putting our differences aside, ideological or otherwise. And as Marco said, you're starting to see this in these primary fights that we're seeing. We're not fighting ideological fights in our primaries. We're having debates about policy and the way forward. But I think that's what we all have to do as a country right now and so I joined them because I thought, look, there's a bunch of former Republicans who I did battle with, but we all got to come together and put democracy front and center. And I think that's what we need to do with our friends. I know you guys do this every day. But I think that's the first step. And I think every day we are, using the Dean campaign again, Marcos watched that. Was there, it was just incredible back then, the energy in terms of pulling people together. But we started out with 481 folks and grew that thing. And I think we start off with, when you talk about a pro-democracy coalition today, we're not starting with 400. There are millions of Americans who do understand the threat, who do want to make it front and center and make that fight. And we can recruit a hell of a lot more other Americans to join that fight. Because I think if this country understands that it's the authoritarian movement versus a pro-democracy coalition, I think there'll be a lot of people who that's what the battleground is in 2022. I have a faith in the American people that a vast majority of them will sign up with the pro-democracy side. That's the fight we need to have, because that's what is at stake right now.
So you gave us 5 reasons that, and I still want to dig into some of those, but
Sure.
I just want to quickly add a couple more. I think Donald Trump making it a referendum on Trump versus Biden again sort of rallies our base in a way that wouldn't be happening if it was just Joe Biden, a referendum on Joe Biden. So he's actually doing us a favor by stepping up. And I think, and I do want to talk a little bit about last year's elections because we didn't do so well. But I also I'll just pre-acknowledge that Donald Trump was explicitly pushed out of both New Jersey and Virginia, and it kept at arm's length. It was a con. I mean, we're seeing that in Virginia now, right? It was a con, but Donald Trump was kept away. He's not staying away this year. Right? He's going to be right in the middle.
It's easy to give him 48 other places he can go to.
Yeah,
right. You can keep them out of 2 places and say, hey, if you want to do something down in Georgia, go ahead. You want to go to Arizona a couple times, fine. Just there's no way. Marcus, you're absolutely right. There is absolutely no way on this planet they're going to be able to do that. First, I mean, he's already injecting himself in Georgia. He's already getting into fights with DeSantis, and it's so easy. By the way, one of the things about working with the Lincoln Project is it's so easy to goad him into a fight like that. I mean, because you can appeal to the audience of one, say, "Hey, DeSantis wants your job," and damn it, if he won't leap to the bait. So I just think that it's a much different. This is so much different than the off-year elections in Virginia and New Jersey. He is going to be not just him though. That's what I'm saying. I mean, Herschel Walker is going to say something. He is. They have that same problem that they had in 2010, except I think this is writ large. You had 139 of these members vote to not certify the election. We all know Jim Jordan's out of his mind, right? So, I mean, all these guys are going to be out there, and I think that's going to be the point for the American people to decide: do you really want to put these people in charge, and risk your democracy, which it's more than a risk. It's just guaranteed that if they take the House in 139 of them voted not to certify. If Jim Jordan is Speaker of the House because they take it in 2022, even if they got to the majority by electing 10 moderate Republicans, let's just fantasize about that. Do we really think that caucus would they're going to certify the loser? That's who they're going to certify. So that's it. So I just think that's what's at stake here, and I think we've got to make it clear that that's what's at stake here.
So can I make one point real quick about the candidates, which is, you keep talking about 2010, 2012, the I am not a witch ad is coming. And the difference is this time, I don't know if the Republicans are going to reject it and run away from it. I mean, seriously.
That's my. You're right, Perry. Yeah, you're right. And I don't think anybody is got that in their, as all these pundits are projecting the demise in 2022, the Democrats in trouble. I don't think they're like, it's like the Republicans are somehow innocent bystanders through all this, right? But they can't stop themselves. I mean, they're going to do this, and they're going to say things out loud, a lot of them. And I think you're right. A large swath of the party won't push those people out. They'll embrace them, which I think is going to scare the hell out of a lot of Americans who were sort of, like I said, like Marco said, Trump wasn't out there so big in the Virginia, New Hampshire, New Jersey races, not at all. And so you could, Youngkin could put on the fleece sweater jacket and fool people. It's now becoming clear who he really is. A lot of us told people that's who he really was, but and got hammered for doing it. But I think it's going to be a lot harder to hide that, not just Trump, but hide what the Republican Party has truly become.
So my plea to you, so go to the Lincoln Project crew and convince them to come up with a plan to convince Trump that the best way to knock out Ron DeSantis is for DeSantis to lose his governor's race this year. That would clear the field for him for 2024. So he's got to.
I love that idea. I will talk. I will
No,
bring that idea for sure.
There's other factor. The Supreme Court and Roe v. Wade.
Yeah,
that's going to be explosive,
and it's going to happen for sure in the summer at some point. I agree. I mean, that's what I'm saying. There's all these things. I think when I said there are events that we can't foresee, I think there are events we can foresee. That's one of them for sure. That's going to, I think, change again the way people are thinking about the November 2022 races. So I started out at the beginning of last year in that same mindset of, oh, woe is us, we're redistricting, we didn't pick up any state legislatures. I mean, something that, like, look, the Democratic Party has been asleep at the switch for decades on local and legislative races. Republicans have been doing that and focused on it for decades, and it paid off, in terms of not being able to, sort of cutting Democrats' ability to impact a lot of redistricting. I thought for sure they'd be 8-10 seats up just on drawing the lines, and I was pretty pessimistic. But it's just not happening. That part of one of the reasons is they were so good at redrawing lines last time that they can't. There's no way to create more Republican districts. They've controlled it for so long that they can draw all they want, but they can't really. It can't be as far-reaching as I thought they could. And Dave Wasserman and others thought that, but I really think that was the first thing that I started to see, and then I started to put together some of the, just look at who they're nominating. Herschel Walker, again, if he gets a nomination, being a great example of how they're doing a lot of the work for us, but we have a lot of work to do, and we've got the tools and the ability to get those people out, to know where we have to target our volunteers and resources and time. And I don't think this is something that we can count on the committees in Washington to take care of. I mean, that's how we got where we're at. We've got to do it. It's literally what you've been building, and that so many people who weren't dependent on party committees back, the Dean campaign, obviously, I mean, come on, forget it. They were never going to pay any attention to us. But there are a lot of good, hardworking activists out there who I think now understand that it's our time again. We are the ones that are going to have to save democracy. And we can't wait for Garland. We can't wait for the Southern District of New York. We can't wait for them to reform the filibuster. I hope some of that stuff all happens, but we cannot wait for it. We've got to start growing the pro-democracy coalition from the bottom up, citizen to citizen. Forget
we pick
about
up 2 seats, then we can look at the party and say, now you can't blame it on Manchin and Sinema anymore.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. That's what
that's our job.
Yeah. It's us.
So let me just jump in here, because this is over the weekend, and then I listened to one of your follow-up podcasts, and I was like, exactly. But over the weekend, the long weekend, there were several doomsday. I mean, there's just been a stream of Biden's doomsday articles, right? It's all over. Biden's not going to get his legacy legislation. Democrats are doomed, and frankly, congressional Democrats, right? I like what you say, like, it's not going to be down. We can't wait for anybody. It's got to be us. Right. We got to do it. The organizers on the ground have to do it. It's got to be a grassroots uprising, pro-democracy movement, right? But congressional Democrats could do themselves a favor by getting out of their own way. I mean, you have like people, moderates like Sherry Bustos of Illinois and Stephanie Murphy of Florida and whatever, and they're both retiring, saying, oh, the Democratic leadership went the wrong route and tried to get too progressive with the legislation and blah, blah, blah. And we need a reset. And, there's a whole bunch of like negative and how are we going to salvage Biden's agenda? And I'm convinced that this isn't going to be about how much Democrats got done. And if Democrats don't stop talking about each other, they're just going to step on themselves. I mean, their only message should be something like, we have 50 Democratic senators who support voting rights. We have 50 Republican senators who don't. Those 50 Republican senators are using a Senate rule that the segregationists used back in the 60s. And the only difference is now there's a lot more segregationists now in the Republican Party than there were then. You know what I mean? Like it's got to be... It's got to be about democracy. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah,
Carrie, I agree with you. I don't hold a lot of hope for them to stop doing the circular firing squad. I mean, part of this gets to, again, what I was talking about, where and I think Biden probably suffered from this, this normalcy bias that, a creature of the Senate, I can get those votes over there. And if you think that,
he said that in multiple debates.
Right? Yes,
right. he can get those.
And so if you believe that, if you cannot, this is the thing that blows my mind, right? They said, these same group of thinking said, well, Trump could never get elected in the United States. That'll never happen in America. Guess what it did? January 6th, that could never happen in America. Guess what it did? When you say, look, there's an authoritarian movement, and it's going to try to take power by any means, and it already did an failed attempted coup. No, that can't happen here. That's not going to happen. Trippy, you guys are all alarmists. That's not real. So if you're one of those folks, then an ideological fight over how big Build Back Better should be, or what should be in the package, well, that's normal. I mean, that's how you would normally do something. Trying to tell them, no, this is not the time. What we have to do is agree within the caucus what we can get passed and pass it, and get, and what we can do for voting rights, get it done and move. Is not there are people who still in office who still do not get the threat. I think as they experience more and more intransigence, I mean, just sort of like that this isn't working. Some of them are quitting, moving on. God, or even, God, I don't want to be a member of the minority, and we're going to be the minority, so I'm leaving now. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say is that's how you think if you actually don't think democracy is at stake, right? That makes sense. If you think democracy is at stake, you don't sit there and go, oh, I'm going to be in the minority. You go, we got to fight to save the democracy, and I'm going to do everything I can to do it. I still think, and I think we've, as you pointed out, Carrie, when we started talking about this, that how many Americans really see that threat. This is how democracy dies, right? By the time everybody wakes up, it's too late. That's why I think it is from the bottom up. It is at the grassroots level. It is building a pro-democracy coalition. It is saying, we don't care if you used to be a Republican or you're still a Republican, but if you're willing to fight with us and join with us, independents, Republicans, Democrats alike, from the bottom up, organizing to save our democracy and to support pro-democracy candidates. And right now there's only one place those candidates exist, unfortunately. I would love, I think we should have two democracy parties, but we only have one. It's the Democratic Party right now.
There's Liz Cheney in Wyoming.
Yeah, well, but that's the whole point. You have 139 of them only 139 of the caucus voted to not certify, but today you could only count on maybe 2. Liz?
How many will say that Joe Biden won the election, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's down to 2, really.
Yeah.
2, maybe 9, but it's like ridiculous. And of the 9, they're doing the same thing. Most of them are retiring or been forced out. Liz Cheney's the only one I know that I think is standing for re-election. Everybody else has either quit or been forced out.
Yeah. So I know we already talked a little bit about 2019. 2021. So, but I really want to focus
a little bit about that. We have talked a little bit about 2019 for years now. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
I can talk about 1979 if you want. That's how.
So
that's how. That's how outdated I am. So
we had all the names of people that voted in 2020. Yet in Virginia, which wasn't particularly close in 2020, we ended up losing by 3 points. I think was the final tally. It wasn't that particularly close. So just having the names doesn't get people out. So what's the difference between 19? Is it just a question of the stakes?
Well, I mean, 2 things. One, as you pointed out, Trump wasn't running around Virginia campaigning for Youngkin, and Youngkin got away with not having to kowtow to Trump because he was going to lose the nomination. Remember, Youngkin, that thing was a convention nomination. They didn't have a primary. They did it, basically behind closed doors. I mean, in the old convention sense of it, and so he never had to. I don't think anybody in Virginia truly understood the stakes, right? I mean, and at the same time, there'd been such success over the years in Virginia for Democrats. So I was like, they don't need me today. They're going to win anyway. That kind of thing. It's Terry McAuliffe. Look, we can all get into what went wrong or right in the campaign, but I think fundamentally, it's not going to be the same terrain that they face in 2022. They are not nominating. Even the phony Youngkins out there are not going to get most of the. I mean, maybe J.D. Vance can pull that off in Ohio. I hope not. I mean, but it'd be the same trick, right? The same. Be Trumpy now, and then put the fleece sweater jacket on. But and that may happen in a couple places. And be a problem for us. I'm not, but I think the reality is Trump is going to be out there. They're going to have a bunch of candidates who are saying things and doing things that are, I think, that will appall a lot of people. And I don't think you're going to have that that sort of. And also, I think we were still in the Biden's won. We can all rest now. I mean, there's all that decompression. I don't think that's there now. I really don't. I think that's what I mean about the energy that's growing. I mean, the real, I think every day more and more Americans are waking up to what the real threat is. We still got a lot of work to do to make sure that in 2022, they do all understand what the real threat is. If we're successful in that, we win. I really believe that.
So a little just fun fact is that traffic at Daily Kos was down in 2021 after the election year. It always happens, right? People are tired, just like you said, they're exhausted. And you could see this across the entire media landscape. CNN, MS, everybody was down. Even Fox News was down. Just in January alone, these first couple of weeks, we're up around 15 to 20% traffic, just like that. And it's not like the news has gotten juicier. No. Like it's been pretty steady.
I've been writing some very good stuff. I've been writing some very, very compelling pieces.
But I think but as you point out, if anything, in the last few weeks, it's been more doom and gloom than anything. Biden's doomed presidency, all this stuff. So in other words, it's not because, there's been all this, Biden's surging in the polls and there's all this. No, this is, I think, again, people starting to realize what the stakes are, and 2, like you said, there was like a little bit of let's take a rest. I think through 2021, I think people are getting ready for the battle, and I think those numbers are going to increase every month moving forward. I really do, and that's where our opportunity to build the pro-democracy coalition is. If all of us are talking about doing that, about building it, like I said, there's all kinds of, you can join the Lincoln Project, you can join Midas Touch, you can join you guys. I mean, there's all kinds of people out there and voices out there that we need to get pushing the pro-democracy coalition and get people to join with, Fair Fight Georgia. I mean, there's all kinds of great groups out there that we can plug people into or help them get the tools to plug in and do what needs to be done to win in November. And I think we will.
And we've talked to a number. We've had a focus now for several months on talking to grassroots groups in these key states that we're going to need to win, that have big Senate races or gubernatorial races, et cetera. So absolutely give to those grassroots groups. Join the Trippy Show, watch us, that type of thing. But is there a congressional member, any of them, who you think kind of who you've gotten a sense actually get what's happening here, and they sound like they get what's happening, and they would be someone to potentially watch? Because I think about people who have built movements. Bernie Sanders built a movement. Sure. Senator Warren, to some extent, built a movement. So, is there anyone you're seeing who you really think is getting this and would be someone to watch as we go forward?
I think I put it this way, I think there are several people that are starting to get, like Sawal, there's people who are out there the question is, I think it's with the mainstream press, it's just incredibly hard for that person, let's say pick somebody to get the attention of the mainstream media. They're all in this doom Biden thing, right? But no one's. So I don't think, it's not that they're not out there. It's that I think we have to build the platform that gets people, wake people up, and gives them their voice. On this show, on the Trippy Show, sort of starts to lift some of these voices out there, because I don't think cable's going to do it. I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, the reality is that part of the coalition, I think, has to be a comms core, because look, Fox, OAN, Newsmax, Breitbart, it's been built with billions of dollars and over 10, 20, 30, 40 years in some cases. It's an outrage machine. They just manufacture another outrage tomorrow to get all their people outraged, out there creating the next thing that some Democrat's going to step in and or not have an answer to, because go back to the birther thing. I mean, how many of us rolled our eyes and said, no one's going to believe that he wasn't born in America? We all rolled our eyes. Well, guess what? The outrage machine did its thing, and sooner or later you got to show the birth certificate. So I think when what we have to do is, no one's going to put billions of dollars on the table to build the pro-democracy machine, message machine. It doesn't exist. And cable's always going to do whatever the Democrats and Republicans are fighting about today, the two sides, and again, act like the Republicans are innocent bystanders in all of this. Build back better or whatever. You don't have a single vote, but it's all about Democrats are arguing. I think, one of the things I think we need to figure out how to do is create like a comms core where, when there's some big disinformation or some outrage machine generated, that it's not just retweeting this, or it's like that we have a million people out there who immediately respond with the pro-democracy message that's been created, whether it's been created by Lincoln Project or somebody else to fight that machine. I think it's really necessary to try to harness that and get people to join a comms core. I mean, it's like we're going to have to fight legal battles. We're going to have to fight communications battles, and we're going to have to fight on the ground and organize and get people out and register. And then we're going to have to fight at the ballot box to make sure that to get injunctions or anything else that they're going to throw at us. But look, there are lots of attorneys who would sign up with Mark Elias or someone like that to be part of a legal team on election day across the, in all these states, plugging them into races that are going to need help that day. So I think that it is a big undertaking, but I think they're using the attorneys as a good example. There are plenty of them. That's their skill. How do we channel that to the right thing? How do we fight the disinformation machine, the outrage machine, by creating a comms corps that's actively committed? You can commit to go work in your precinct too, but you're also actively committed to spreading the articles that you got. Again, where we sort of get more than just one of our groups pushing our own stuff out, but get everybody sort of plugged into, here's the best thing that got written today, bam, and all of us get it out there that was against something that the outrage machine was fomenting.
Well, let me just add, that sounds, I think that would be great. It also sounds defensive. I wonder if we can create something where what we're putting out is the worst thing a Republican said today. In other words, instead of just responding to them and trying to correct this disinformation, because God only knows, it just keeps on coming, but actually be publicizing the crap that they're putting out there on a regular basis. I wonder if I like your idea quite a bit. I'd like to be playing some offense too.
No, I agree on the offense part. I was just sort of sort of shorthanding. Right now, there is nobody defending against the outrage machine. It's definitely not going to be anybody. There are good journalists that call stuff out, but that's here, there, and but it's not coordinated. It's not, and there's no pro side. There is no pro democracy positive, pushing proactively messaging to get people to engage. So I think there are a bunch of different things we need to start to build. And part of that was really cool in the Dean campaign was how many people in technology rose to the occasion and came up with ideas about how to build those things. Marcos was one of them. There are plenty.
Those were the days.
Yeah. Well, and then Trump happened.
So we are unbelievably out of time. This may be, Carrie, the fastest that hour has ever gone.
No, I know. I had several more things that I wanted to touch on. But, I didn't even good stuff. So.
I didn't even start to really dig into your 5 options, and then suddenly it's like, well, no, I guess we're not going to, because there was so much good stuff that we talked about. Joe Trippi is the host of That Trippi Show. You can get that show anywhere you get your podcasts. Anything else you want to plug?
Just at Joe Trippi on Twitter. Probably another good place to find
absolutely.
me.
Joe, thank you so much for joining us. That was incredible. Really appreciate it.
Thank you both for having me.
Carrie, we have a minute. Do you have it's encouraging.
It is encouraging.
But I was just going to say, there's anybody that says Democrats are going to lose because X, Y, Z, you just don't know. There is so much at play, much more than in a typical midterm. That's sort of my big takeaway.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the point he made about the congressional Democrats who are retiring and those who are grousing about whether or not Build Back Better was too big or too ambitious, or maybe if, Biden had sprinkled his magic fairy dust on voting rights earlier or something, Sinema would have gotten a whiff of that and turned into an angel. Come on. So we can quibble over, whether or not there were missteps made. We are where we are. We now have 10 months? Is that right? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Basically. So we gotta deal with what we got. And Joe Biden gave probably the best speech I've ever heard him give, certainly of his presidency, but maybe ever, about January 6th, right? And I was like, yeah. And then he gave the voting rights speech that so many people wanted to hear. And then, people were like, it's too little too late. And cinema stepped all over it before blah, 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 blah. And, voting rights is going down in flames. Look, I want voting rights. I wanted Build Back Better too. There's a lot of things that I want, but we are where we are. And, people have to find a way to get involved. And, I think the White House actually, contrary to reports of Biden's, the Biden administration's early death, right? I think they actually started out with a strong messaging about what this midterm election should be about. And the congressional Democrats who are so sort of mired in normalcy, in what a normal, cycle would look like and whatever, we got to stop paying attention to them. And, they're not on board with these are ahistorical times. And I think that was a point that was very well made by Joe Trippi. And I appreciated it because I'm like, God, what are the congressional Democrats doing? We got an election to win.
It's definitely a theme we're going to be coming back to time and time again this year, because things will happen. Like he said, we know a lot of factors that are already going to play a factor, factors that are impact the race. There's so much we don't know. I mean, we don't even know what happens if Omicron crests and now we have herd immunity and things can get back to normal even sooner. I mean, who knows, right? There's so many, or maybe in 6 months, whatever immunity we got from Omicron will fade and we'll have a new wave in September, right?
Right, but you know what never changes? The Republican Party is an extremist party now. They're an extremist, pro-fascist, anti-democracy party. And that is not going to change regardless of what Omicron does.
That's all the time we have today. Carrie, thank you so much for being such a wonderful host. Thanks to Joe Trippi for joining us today to have this conversation. Thanks to Walter Einenkel and Kara Celaya for producing and promoting the show and doing all the great things behind the scenes. And thank you, the viewer and the reader and the listener, for joining us. You are what's going to make us, what's going to drive us to victory this November. And remember, we win in November. There's no more filibuster. That means Washington, D.C. becomes a state. We get 2 new senators. We get all sorts of goodies, voting rights, we need to win. We need to win. And it really is going to be up to you to drive that revolution, to drive that effort. So thank you so much for joining us, for being part of that. And I look forward to being with you side by side in this battle this year. Thank you so much. See you next week.